Hey there guys, alright, today we are back with the Great War. This time we're on a week 62, and we finally have a battle on the Western Front for the first time in what feels like forever. The Battle of Loos, new offensives on the Western Front. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Because, really, more of you followed me at Twitch and actively watched me while I'm live. You don't even have to really actively watch me. You can just have me open in a browser, mute the browser, and that will count as a view for me. And that only helps me out. And it doesn't require much work on your end. It just requires you to click a couple buttons. So please, please, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be. Pay sucks ass, dude. Please. Get me out of here. Please. Anyways. Let's go ahead and dive right in.
Russia had been losing territory to Germany and Austria-Hungary for 5 months at an enormous rate and had repeatedly asked her allies France and Britain to make new offensives in the West to reduce the German pressure. And this week, the Allies strike.
Dun dun dun.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week, the Germans took Vilna from Russia, a pretty big loss, but the German advance of the past 5 months was winding down, and the Russians began to secure their line.
Oh, what a great this animation. Great addition. It really helps. Really. I feel like I'm sounding sarcastic there, but I'm not. I'm being genuine. I love this animation. I love it when they do this. It helps really showcase, like, it just helps a lot.
There was rioting at home in Russia and new taxes in Britain, and Bulgarian troops mobilized, though they claimed it had nothing to do with Serbia. Here's what followed. Things have been relatively quiet on the Western Front for a while, but no longer, and I'll jump in right there. France and Britain simply could not ignore the danger that Russia might actually fall any longer. All those German troops in the east would then be transferred to the west. So now they both launched ambitious new offensives. The French targets were, as they had been all year, the Vimy Ridge in Artois and the railway junction at Mézières in Champagne. The German defenses at the Vimy Ridge were extremely strong though, and the attacks, launched at 12:25 on September 25th, had very little success. The next day, though, the French took Souchez and made large gains at the ridge, the crest of which they captured on the 29th. But already, French leader General Joseph Joffre...
God, that man is fucking tall. And look at those shoulders, he broad as fuck. Yo, this man could be in the NFL. I don't even fucking like football. I don't understand football. I think it's stupid. But goddamn. This man could play for it.
Was losing faith in the whole operation and began to think of it as a demonstration that was meant to encourage...
Oh, is that Tsar Nicholas? No.
...the British further north. As to the French attack also taking place in Champagne, it was on a front stretching from Auberive to Massige and went off at 9:15 a.m., also on the 25th, with a force of 18 divisions attacking the German positions. Wave after wave of Frenchmen came crashing across no man's land and over the German trenches, and the French made a 3-kilometer dent in the German line on a 20-kilometer front.
Dang.
In many places...
That's for what this war has been, that's pretty fucking good, I think.
They broke through and sent assault troops to the next line of trenches while others mopped up. Actually, in some places, 3 whole lines of trenches were overrun, and there was a big expectation of a real breakthrough, but the Germans had one more card to play. About 3 kilometers behind the German lines was a second system of German trenches. They were on reverse slopes, and they were a serious obstacle. Over the next few days, the French repeatedly attacked, but couldn't get enough artillery forward, and the Germans were able to bring up loads of reserves to launch devastating counterattacks wherever the French made a breakthrough. The French casualties were mounting so alarmingly that Joffre suspended the offensive September 30th. He would soon order his commanders to abandon the idea of a breakthrough in Champagne, though, and to wage a war of attrition.
God, Joseph Joffre's a fucking giant of a man. Look at him. Those boots, Those don't have a thick sole, it looks like. Maybe at the heel. They don't look like they're all that thick at the bottom.
Attrition instead as the autumn dragged on. Well, that's
It looked like maybe those boots were adding at most 2 inches to the height, but everyone else was wearing the same kind of boots.
the French attacks. But what of the British? The British kicked off the Battle of Loos also on the 25th on a 10-kilometer front where they used poison gas for the first time, releasing 150 tons of chlorine gas.
That's a lot.
5,243 gas cylinders. 600 German soldiers were directly killed by the gas. At one point, British troops even advanced nearly 5 kilometers, and one battalion, and I don't know which one unfortunately, led its assault by dribbling a football across no man's land. On the second day of the battle, the British pushed through Loos to the Lens-la-Bassée road, and though they had a considerable numerical advantage, several dozen German machine guns now faced them. Now, here's a quote from 5 months earlier in the war from British General Sir Douglas Haig. "The machine gun is a much overrated weapon, and 2 per battalion is more than sufficient." He was, as was his habit, very wrong, for the Germans had this to write about the advancing columns of thousands of British troops. "The men stood and fired triumphantly into the mass of men advancing across no man's land. As the entire field of fire was covered with the enemy's infantry, the effect was devastating, and they could be seen falling literally in hundreds." For the British, the death toll at Loos was more intense than in any previous battle of the war. The slaughter also continued further south, where they advanced on Bois Hugo. Robert Graves wrote years later stories about Loos
Robert Graves lived a long-ass time. Damn, 90 years old.
in his book Goodbye to All That. One officer led his troops forward 20 meters, and he had them lie down and begin covering fire. When the platoon to his left also lay down, he whistled for his men to rise and advance. He jumped up from the shell hole he was in and signaled for his men, but nobody moved. So he screamed, "You bloody cowards, are you leaving me to go alone?" His sergeant, who was lying on the ground with a broken shoulder, moaned, "Not cowards, sir, willing enough, but they're all fucking dead." A German machine gun had caught them all as they rose to the whistle and killed them all. The Germans called the battle the Leichenfeld der Loos, the field of corpses of Loos. After the 5th British attempt at Bois Hugo to pass the woods had failed, the Germans even stopped firing at the British, entirely out of sheer compassion for the appalling destruction they had wrought on the attackers. Indeed, one source claims that the 12 attacking battalions suffered 8,000 casualties out of 10,000 men in 4 hours. And on the 28th, General Henry Rawlinson wrote to the king about the offensive. "From what I can ascertain, some of the divisions did actually reach the enemy's trenches, for their bodies can now be seen on barbed
Oh my god.
wire." J.E. Edmonds, the British official historian, gave the British casualties in the main attack, the 25th to 28th of September, as 48,367 men.
Those are bugs on the body, isn't it? Those are bugs. That's not rubble. That's gotta be bugs. That's what it looks like. The rubble looks... Yeah, no, there's... No, yeah. No, those shapes don't look like I don't...
The Germans, though, were not experiencing the same success over on the Eastern Front. On the 25th, they were driven back at Dvinsk with heavy losses. On the 26th, driven back south of Pinsk. And on the 28th, they pressed the Russians in the Pripyat marshes, but again lost heavily. And on the 30th, the German advance came to a standstill along the entire line. The British were coming to a standstill as well, but far away in the Middle East. Things were getting tricky for General Charles Townshend's forces as they tried to move up the Tigris River, and his supply train, stretching from Kut back to Basra, was having big problems. There was a shortage of river transport, but the main problem was the Tigris itself. It wound all over the place and had strong currents, so it was only navigable through a narrow channel, even though it was like 150 meters wide. And Townshend's requests for more men, more munitions, and more transport were refused. But slowly, the 6th Indian Division had advanced up the river. some in river transports, but many marching way more than was good for them across inhospitable ground under the blazing Middle Eastern sun. They concentrated at Sheikh Saad, made a feint on the Ottoman positions on the West Bank, and assaulted the East Bank on September 28th. Townsend, as usual, planned carefully and brilliantly, moving his troops on pontoon bridges under cover of darkness, and combining fixing and flanking attacks to win what turned out to be a hard-fought battle. The enemy retired orderly towards Baghdad, but the
Freaking, Indy giving a British general some praise? I'm not used to this.
British riverboats couldn't charge
Or well, giving any general some praise for World War I. Not used to that from Indy. Usually he's shitting on them because they just get their men killed.
after them. Conditions on the Tigris were just too bad. Still, Townsend entered Kut on September 29th. There were plenty of other issues though. The thirst was so intense, it incapacitated the men, and the darkness at night so deep that wounded men could not be found, and they were robbed, mutilated, and murdered by marauding Arabs. But the British had come 600 kilometers from the sea in spite of everything, and the High Command wanted Townsend to head for Baghdad. And that was the week. The Germans being stopped in the east, the British taking territory in the Middle East, but being stopped by the terrain for the moment. And the big news, of course, was the huge new Allied offensives on the Western Front. I'm going to end today with a quote I read in Martin Gilbert's The First World War from the Battle of Loos. A young officer, Roland Layton, wrote this to his fiancée. "Tell him, who thinks war is a glorious, golden thing, who loves to roll forth stirring words of exhortation, invoking honor and praise and valor and love of country, let him but look at a little pile of sodden gray rags that cover half a skull and a shin bone, and what might have been its ribs, or at this skeleton lying on its side, resting half crouching as it fell, perfect but for that it is headless, and with the tattered clothing still draped around it, and let him realize how grand and glorious a thing it is to have distilled all youth and joy and life into a fetid heap of putrescence. Who is there that has known and seen? Who can say that victory is worth the death of even one of these?" So this was the beginning of
Did that soldier make it through the war though?
Britain's autumn offensive. If you'd like to see what happened in Britain's spring offensive, you can click right here to see the Battle of New.
Now is the Battle of Loos. New offensives on the Western Front. The Great War, Week 62. This was a good episode. This was certainly better than I think it was last week's episode that I did not care for it like all. That I found really boring. This one was a step up, mainly because I think it was more hyper focused on a singular battle, I want to say. And then also the talk of, well, getting these whenever Indy goes into discussions on the experience of the soldiers on the grounds, like here with the ending quote, I think that really helps these episodes and helps them. It feels wrong to say the word entertaining, but I can't think of a better word. If they feel I find it more intriguing, engaging to watch when he goes in, when he adds those quotes in, when he's talking about what is being seen on the ground, that kind of thing. These, and then like that poem or whatever that he read from that one guy. I already forgot his name. That I feel like really helps enhance these weekly episodes. But that was the Great War Week 62. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.